Hey guys, Carter from Studio CRJ here. Today I'm going to be demonstrating the Find Dimension Properties Adobe Animate command that I wrote. What this can do is discern different properties of any selected element or elements that you have on your stage or wherever, and it can discern the width and height and some other little properties like that from some mathematical and trigonometric functions. So let's begin the demonstration by looking at this line here. So what I have is this line, and it has a width of 480 and a height of 240. Stroke size doesn't matter unless it's converted to a fill or is a fill or anything like that, because then the width and height will change depending on the stroke size. But we have this line here, and let's say I want to find the length of it. So like across this here, not just width and height, but like the length of the line, and also what its angle is. Now, trying to approximate this manually by like creating a line and then rotating it. Yeah, and trying to approximate its length by changing the scale, and then your width and height will still be separate and things like that. It's kind of a whole process, and let's say you wanted to get the exact amounts and everything. So what you could do is run this command, and it will determine those properties automatically for you, and it will output your settings to the output panel. So let's try running the command on this line here. So what it will output is the type of element that you have. So here it's a shape. It will output its height and width, and here it's going to output its diagonal length and diagonal angle. So what we can determine is the length of this line is going to be 536.65 across the diagonal. Think of it like a rectangle. It's going to, well, if you have like any element here, think of it across this, like, if you look at the bounding box here, think of it across this diagonal line here, crossing between these two corners. It's going to determine the length and angle of that line. And in the case of this line, it kind of works like that. So the length of that line would be 536.65, and we can demonstrate it here. 536.65. And then the angle of it to a horizontal line. So it's going to find the angle of that line to a horizontal. So think of it as 0 here, and then 90 here. This would be 45, and so on. So the angle of that line to this horizontal line is 26.5651. So we would want to rotate this counterclockwise, so we want to do negative instead. And then 26.5651. And we can see that the width and height are almost exact. It's not going to be 100% perfect. If we, let's say we try something like this, and let's try maybe 10, and let's just say 100 by 100. So we can see that it's around 141.4 long, and then the rotation is going to be negative 45. So you can see there it outputted 100 and 100, which is exactly what we want. But what I have it set here is it's going to round whatever length and angle values you have to the nearest like 20th here, because that's how widths and heights are rounded in Adobe Animate. And then also the angle is rounded to the nearest, it'll go like to 0.4444 and then stop right there. So it's going to stop at that place. It's going to round off there. So again, the results won't be like 100% to a T all of the time, but it gets very close, and it's much better than trying to determine it manually. So onto this next demonstration here. We have a bunch of different kinds of elements. We have a couple different types of shapes. So this is a normal shape. This is a drawing object, which gets recognized as a shape. And this is a group, which also gets recognized as a shape for whatever reason. These two are symbols. This one is a graphic set to single frame, and this one is a graphic set to loop. And we can see playing it here, it's making this movement from left to right, and it's also scaling down. So it's moving inside the symbol, but the thing is, this one is set to loop, and this one is set to single frame. This one will also have the same behavior as movie clips, just to let you know. Then we also have some text, and then we have some different kinds of bitmaps. This one has been broken down to a shape. And this is just a normal bitmap, and it's just an object. And it's recognized as a bitmap. So we have all of these kinds of elements here. So now let's select all of them. And we're going to run the command. So as you can see, the output panel is kind of long, and it outputted everything that was recognized. So I'm going to just go through all of these elements and point out which one is which. So this first symbol right here that's being recognized as 260 by 60 is actually this one, where it's 8060 on the first keyframe, and then it shrinks to 4030 on the second keyframe. But the thing is, Adobe Animate recognizes dimensions for looping and playing once, and just like animated graphics as, you know, the entire bounding box for all of the frames for within the graphic. So in this case, it would end up being 260 by 60. We can actually visualize this by going inside this symbol here. We're going to try to just duplicate these layers. We're going to convert everything to keyframes here. And we're just going to do edit multiple frames and select everything. So as you can see here, it's going to be recognized as 260, 60, and those are the values that Adobe Animate recognizes for looping, or rather animating graphics. This next symbol here is just the normal one. As you can see here, the height and width are determined by just the dimensions for any single keyframe that is being selected, because it's set to single frame. So it doesn't have any other keyframes to go off of, or frames. We can just choose another frame number here, and then we can run the... We would be able to run the command again, and it'll say something different. So in this case, it'll say 752.5. But since we have it 13, it's 60 and then 45. And the length and angle are correspondent to that. If you have a symbol and also a bitmap, which you'll see later, it'll also list the item name. So in this case, the symbol's name is just rectangle. So it'll recognize that name and place it right there. Now, the next element here is... Actually, the next three, I believe, are going to be all of these shapes here. So Again, it doesn't matter if you have a shape, a drawing object, or a group. It'll recognize all of these as shapes, and it will just output those just with the type name of shape. It does not discern between drawing objects and groups and raw shapes and things like that. It just doesn't do that with how the command runs. So, oh well. Anyway, this next element here is our text. So, as you can see, the width is 119.9 and the width is 68.15. That lines up right here. And if you were to edit this text or change like the size of this box here, it'll, change the height and width right here. But if you just have spot text where the, the bounding box changes with the lines and what characters you have entered, it'll still, recognize the height and width of that. Now, these last two elements are bitmap elements. So here, for this one, it's being recognized as a bitmap, and it's listing the name of it. So in this case, inside the library here, it's recognized as scrj banner background only .png. I don't know why that's not being used. Whatever. So it recognized the item name there, and it also recognized the dimensions and everything like that. And then here for this broken apart one, it's just a shape because it's just a shape with a bitmap fill being used. So that's how that one works. So as you can see, it can recognize all kinds of elements, and they're all separate. They're all listed, so element 1, element 2, element 3, element 4, and so on and so forth. But let's say you have something like this, and you want to check the dimensions of all three of these shapes separately. So if you try, let's just try running it by doing like a simple box selection right here. So what it will do is it will just recognize it as one shape. If we try to select them all individually, one in a row, one at a time, I mean, it'll also recognize it as just one shape element. So the downside of running this command is it will not recognize separate shapes if they're on like the same layer and they're like raw and everything. It won't recognize it if you're selecting them all in unison. So what you will have to do is either, change some properties around in between. So you could do something like that. And then, even then, this combo right here might just recognize as one shape element. But if we try to run that, actually there, okay, so it's just one shape still. What you could try to do is maybe like transform it or something, do like that, and then like that, and then it might recognize as three elements like that. The other thing that you could do is convert these to drawing objects. So I'm just gonna convert all of them, and now since they're all their own shape elements, they're just going to be recognized regardless of how you select them or whatever you do to them. So that's the only drawback of this. It just won't recognize any raw shapes that are on the same layer if they're selected in unison. It'll just recognize it as like one singular like object, I guess. So that's the one thing to keep in mind when you're running this. Just make sure you have everything that you want to be checked individual and, separate from all the other elements, things like that. So that just about does it for the demonstration. If you have any questions or run into any problems, you can contact me through any of my social platforms or on my Discord server. Relevant links will be linked in the description. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and remember to think bright.